August 18th, 1943. 23:47 hours. Rabaul Harbor, New Britain. The night feels absolute. You can hear the slow, rhythmic slap of water against steel hulls as anchored ships drift gently beneath a sky so dark it seems to swallow even the stars. A humid wind presses against exposed skin, carrying the faint smell of fuel oil, salt, and machinery. Somewhere in the distance, a generator hums unevenly, its vibration traveling through the wooden planks of a forward observation post. Inside a dimly lit command shelter, Lieutenant Commander Hiroshi Takeda of the Imperial Japanese Navy leans over a chart table, sleeves rolled, collar damp with sweat. A cigarette burns between his fingers, its ember glowing brighter each time he exhales. Another false report, he says, flatly tapping the edge of the map with a pencil. They claim detection at bearing 085 again. Across from him, Ensign Masato Kuroda adjusts a pair of headphones connected to a Type 2 Mark I Model 1 air search radar set. The equipment crackles with static, the greenish oscilloscope flickering uncertainly as a faint blip appears. Disappears, then returns. It's inconsistent, Sir Kuroda admits. Range fluctuates. Could be atmospheric interference. Takeda exhales smoke slowly, unimpressed. Or incompetence, he replies. Outside, anti-aircraft crews lounge beside their Type 96. 25mm autocannons, helmets, tilted back uniforms loose in the oppressive heat. Some speak quietly, others laugh. A few lie on their backs, staring up into the empty sky. No engines, no threat, no urgency. The war here still feels distant. Rabaul is supposed to be secure. A fortress, a hub of imperial power in the South Pacific, ringed by airfields, guarded by warships, reinforced by terrain that seems designed by nature itself to resist invasion. And above all, protected by distance. That belief has become doctrine. Inside the shelter, Takeda reaches for the radio handset. Signal the coastal batteries, he orders. Stand down to minimum alert. No need to exhaust crews over phantom readings. Kuroda hesitates, glancing once more at the screen. The blip returns, stronger this time, then fades again. Sir, what if... Takeda cuts him off with a dismissive wave. What if nothing? These American machines cannot see through jungle, through mountains, through night itself. We have tested this again and again. He taps the radar casing with his knuckles. This device is unreliable. A curiosity, not a weapon. The generator flickers, lights dimming momentarily before stabilizing. The radar display shudders, the signal distorting into meaningless noise. Kuroda removes his headphones, unsettled. You see, Takeda says. It cannot even remain stable for a full minute. Outside, a sailor named Petty Officer Kenji Sato sits beside an ammunition crate, idly cleaning his rifle. He pauses, listening. For a moment, there is something, a faint vibration, so subtle it could be mistaken for imagination. He tilts his head, squinting into the darkness. Nothing. The sound fades. He returns to his work. Back inside, Takeda folds his arms. Confidence absolute. The Americans rely on machines because they lack discipline, he says. We rely on eyes, on ears, on instinct. That is why we hold this harbor. That is why they remain far away. Kuroda nods, though his expression betrays uncertainty. Understood, sir. A new operator enters, saluting quickly. Report from Lakunai airfield. No visual contacts. Sky clear. Takeda allows himself a small, satisfied smile. There. Confirmation. He crushes his cigarette into a metal tray. Log the detection as false. Again. The radar screen flickers once more. A cluster of returns forms, briefly sharper than before, aligned in a pattern that almost resembles formation. Then gone. Kuroda stares at the empty display. Something about it lingers. A pattern, a rhythm. But without consistency, without confirmation, it means nothing. Takeda has already turned away. Power down the set for 10 minutes, he orders. Let it cool. Perhaps then it will stop inventing ghosts. Yes, sir. The room settles into a quieter tension as switches are flipped and the hum of the radar fades. The only sound left is the distant churn of engines from docked vessels and the occasional murmur of voices outside. You can feel it, the stillness, the kind that convinces men they are safe. Minutes pass. Then, far above the harbor, beyond the reach of sight, beyond the comfort of assumption, a formation of aircraft cuts silently through the night. North American, B-25. Mitchell bomber's engines throttled carefully, flying low over the water before climbing just enough to clear the terrain. Inside the lead aircraft, Captain Robert L. Hayes of the United States Army Air Forces leans forward, eyes fixed on his instruments. "Hold formation," he says into his headset. "No lights. Maintain radio silence." Beside him, the navigator checks coordinates against a luminous chart. Target confirmed. Rabaul Harbor. 10 minutes out. Behind them, more aircraft follow in disciplined silence, their positions calculated not by guesswork, but by something the Japanese officers below have already dismissed. Radar guidance, patterns, precision. Back in the command shelter, Kuroda wipes condensation from the radar screen, preparing to power it back on. "Sir, if there is even a small chance..." Takeda does not look up. There is not. The switch clicks. The screen glows to life, static. Then, a sudden unmistakable cluster of returns. Closer now, much closer. Kuroda freezes. "Sir." "Contacts. Multiple. Bearing 080. Range decreasing rapidly." Takeda turns slowly, irritation already forming. Another fluctuation. He stops mid-sentence. The pattern holds. Stable. Consistent. Advancing. Outside, Sato looks up again. This time he hears it clearly. A distant, growing thunder. Not wind, not machinery. Engines. Many of them. His hand tightens around his rifle. Inside the shelter, Kuroda's voice trembles. "They're not fading, sir. They're coming in formation." Takeda steps closer to the screen, eyes narrowing. For the first time that night, certainty falters. The blips do not disappear. They grow. Closer, clearer, relentless. And above the harbor, the darkness begins to move. The radar screen pulses steadily now. Lieutenant Commander Hiroshi Takeda leans in his earlier confidence, tightening into something less certain, though he refuses to name it. The green glow illuminates his face, sharp lines casting shadows across his eyes as the cluster of returns advances without hesitation. "Range," he demands. Ensign Masato Kuroda swallows fingers, adjusting the dials with deliberate care. 38 kilometers, closing fast. There is no fluctuation now. No fading signal, no distortion. The pattern is clean structured, unmistakable. Even to a system they have dismissed for months. Takeda straightens, forcing his voice back into authority. Visual confirmation. The order is immediate, instinctive, almost defensive. A signalman grabs the field telephone, relaying the command toward WWII airfield and the outer observation posts. Across the harbor, men begin to lift binoculars toward a sky that still appears empty. You can feel the delay, the seconds stretching, the reliance on sight, on proof, on something that can be trusted more than a machine they have already judged. Outside, Petty Officer Kenji Sato stands fully now, rifle forgotten at his side. The sound above has grown no longer subtle, no longer uncertain. It rolls across the harbor like distant thunder, steady and layered. He turns toward a nearby anti-aircraft crew. You hear that he calls. One of the gunners shrugs, half amused. "Probably transports. Ours." But Sato shakes his head. "No, too many." Inside the shelter, the telephone crackles. WWII reports negative visual. Sky clear. Takeda nods once sharply. "There." As expected. He turns to Kuroda. "Reduce, gain." The system is amplifying noise again. Kuroda hesitates. "Sir, the signal is stable. It matches formation spacing. This is not random interference." Takeda's voice hardens. "You are interpreting patterns where none exist." Another officer, Lieutenant Junichi Mori, steps closer to the screen, arms folded. "Still, it is unusual," Mori admits. "We have not seen persistence like this before." Takeda glances at him, irritation returning. "And yet we have never confirmed a single one of these readings visually." He gestures toward the door. "Our eyes have never lied to us." As if summoned by that statement, a distant light flickers briefly on the horizon, then disappears. Sato sees it. A flash. Small, almost insignificant. He points. "There. Did you see that?" The gun crew pauses, uncertain now. One of them raises binoculars, scanning. Nothing. The darkness swallows the moment. Inside, the radar returns move closer still. 28 kilometers. Kuroda adjusts the range scale, his breathing shallow. "Sir, if these are aircraft, they will be over the harbor in less than 6 minutes." Takeda remains silent for a moment. The calculation is simple. Too simple. If the radar is correct, then every assumption made over the past months is wrong. He rejects it. Sound the preliminary alert, he orders finally, but do not activate full batteries until visual confirmation. The distinction matters. It delays action. It preserves pride. A bell begins to ring faintly across parts of the harbor, hesitant, incomplete. Some crews respond. Others ignore it, accustomed to false alarms that have led to nothing. At WWII airfield, a young officer named Second Lieutenant Daichi Hoshino scans the sky through field glasses. Sweat runs down his neck as he turns slowly, searching. Nothing, he mutters. Behind him, a mechanic laughs quietly. Told you. Another ghost. Hoshino lowers the glasses, uncertain. He listens. There it is again, faint, but growing. He raises the glasses once more. This time he thinks he sees movement, not light, not shape, just absence. A darker patch against the dark. He cannot be sure. Inside the command shelter, the radar screen tightens into clarity. Multiple returns, aligned, maintaining spacing, descending slightly. Kuroda's voice is barely steady now. 22 kilometers. Takeda steps closer, his earlier dismissal now colliding with something he cannot fully suppress. Could it be reflections from terrain, he asks, though the question sounds weaker than he intends. Mori shakes his head slowly. Terrain does not move toward us. The room falls quiet. You can feel the shift, not yet panic, but the first fracture in certainty. Another call comes through. Outer observation, post reports. Possible engine noise. Direction east-northeast. No visual. Takeda closes his eyes briefly. Engine noise. Still no sight. Still no confirmation. He opens them again. Decision forming under pressure. Prepare. Anti-aircraft batteries, he says. But hold fire until targets are seen. Outside, crews begin to move with more urgency now. Ammunition belts are lifted, weapons adjusted, searchlights slowly rotating into position, though still inactive. Sato grips the edge of a crate, eyes fixed upward. The sound is undeniable now. Layered. Approaching. He can feel it in his chest. A vibration that matches the rhythm of engines cutting through the night. At WWII, Hoshino suddenly stiffens. I see something, he whispers. He focuses. There. A shape. Then another. Low. Fast. Emerging from darkness like shadows given motion. Aircraft, he shouts. Multiple aircraft inbound. The words travel through the line, crackling, delayed. Inside the shelter, Kuroda does not need the confirmation anymore. 16 kilometers, he says. Takeda stares at the screen. At the pattern, he dismissed. At the precision, he denied. The blips continue forward, unbroken, unstoppable. For a brief moment, he understands. But the understanding arrives late. Above the harbor, the first silhouettes break free from the darkness. Engines roar louder now, no longer distant, no longer abstract. Real, immediate, and descending. The first aircraft emerges fully from the darkness, just as the searchlights snap to life. A beam cuts across the sky, then another sweeping wildly at first, before locking onto movement. The white light catches the underside of a low-flying bomber, revealing its shape in a sudden blinding instant. Twin engines, broad wings, a painted star barely visible before the beam slips away again. Enemy aircraft confirm. The call erupts across the harbor. You can hear it now without doubt. The engines are no longer distant. They fill the air, overlapping, pressing down from above, like a storm breaking open. At WWII airfield, Second Lieutenant Daichi Hoshino drops his binoculars and runs toward the nearest signal post. Multiple bombers, low altitude, approaching from the east-northeast. Behind him, mechanics scramble, some diving for cover, others frozen in place as the realization spreads faster than orders can be issued. Inside, the lead aircraft, Captain Robert L. Hayes, grips the control column. Eyes narrowed as the first searchlight sweeps across his formation. They've spotted us, he says calmly into his headset. Maintain course. Bombing run in 60 seconds. The bombardier beside him adjusts his sight voice, steady. Target acquired. Harbor installations. Behind them, the formation holds. Each aircraft maintains spacing guided not by guesswork, but by precise timing and coordination established long before they crossed into enemy territory. Back on the ground, Lieutenant Commander Hiroshi Takeda stands rigid inside the command shelter, the sound of engines now vibrating through the walls. Activate all batteries, he shouts. Full engagement. The delay has ended, but it has already cost them. Anti-aircraft guns open fire. The sharp rhythmic bursts of Type 96 cannons filling the air with flashes and smoke. Tracers streak upward, cutting bright lines through the darkness as crews aim toward shapes they are only just beginning to see. Petty Officer Kenji Sato flinches as the first guns fire beside him. He grabs a helmet, pulling it down as he looks up again. The sky is no longer empty. Aircraft move across it in formation, their silhouettes clearer now, as searchlights chase them in frantic arcs. They're too low, one gunner shouts. Adjust elevation. Another crew swings their weapon, struggling to track the speed of the incoming bombers. Inside the shelter, Ensign Masato Kuroda stares at the radar screen. The blips are directly overhead now, no longer distant, no longer theoretical. They're above us, he says quietly. Takeda does not respond. He has stepped outside. The humid air hits him immediately, thick with smoke and noise. He looks up just as a searchlight locks onto a bomber passing almost directly over the harbor. For a fraction of a second, everything is illuminated. The aircraft, the markings, the open bomb bay doors. Then the light shifts and the moment is gone. Take cover, someone yells. The first bombs fall. You hear the whistle before the impact, a rising tearing sound that ends in a violent explosion near the docks. Fire erupts, throwing debris into the air as shock waves ripple across the water. Sato is knocked to one knee, ears ringing. He looks toward the source of the blast, eyes wide as flames begin to spread across stacked supplies and fuel containers. Hit on the eastern pier, a voice shouts through the chaos. More bombs follow. Each one finds its mark with terrifying consistency. A warehouse ignites. A moored vessel shudders as an explosion tears through its deck. Fuel burns on the surface of the water, spreading fire in uneven, shifting patterns. Inside the lead bomber, the bombardier calls out, "Direct hit." Secondary explosions confirmed. Captain Hayes keeps his voice level. "Maintain altitude. Prepare for second pass." Behind them, other aircraft release their payloads in sequence, each guided by coordinates, refined through repeated detection and tracking. Below the harbor is no longer a place of control. It is confusion. It is fire. It is reaction without preparation. Takeda shields his eyes from the glare, watching as another explosion erupts near a cluster of anti-aircraft positions. They knew exactly where to strike, Mori says beside him, disbelief cutting through his voice. Takeda does not answer, because he is beginning to see it. Not randomness, not chance, precision. Back inside the shelter, Kuroda watches the radar screen shift again. New returns, not retreating, circling. "They're coming around," he says louder now. Second approach forming. The pattern is unmistakable. The same formation, the same spacing, adjusted, refined. Outside, searchlights struggle to reacquire targets as the bombers turn, slipping in and out of visibility. Gun crews adjust frantically, but their movements are reactive, always just behind the path of the aircraft. At Lakunai Airfield, Hoshino dives into a trench as explosions ripple across the runway. Dirt and debris rain down the ground, trembling beneath him. "They're hitting the airfield," someone shouts. A parked aircraft erupts in flame, its fuel igniting in a sudden burst that lights the entire area for a brief, horrifying moment. Back over the harbor, Sato stumbles to his feet, coughing through smoke. He looks up again. The aircraft are still there. Still moving, still controlled. "They're not guessing," he mutters. No one answers him, because the truth is becoming visible to everyone. Inside the shelter, Takeda returns his uniform marked with ash. "What is their pattern?" he demands. Kuroda points to the screen. They approach, strike, then reform at this bearing, then return again. It is consistent. Every movement is deliberate. Takeda stares at the display. At the very system he dismissed, the one that showed this pattern before any bomb fell. Outside, another wave begins its descent. The engines grow louder again. The formation tightens, and this time the defenders are waiting, but not ready. The second wave does not arrive with surprise. It arrives with expectation. And that difference changes everything and nothing at the same time. You can hear the engines building again over the harbor, louder now because every man below is straining to track them. Searchlights sweep more aggressively, anti-aircraft crews already adjusting their aim before the bombers even descend. "Hold steady, a gun," Captain shouts, gripping the side of his mount as his crew aligns the barrel toward the dark sky. Wait for visual. Do not waste ammunition, but restraint is already breaking down. A gun fires too early, then another. Tracers streak upward in uneven bursts, some far ahead of the incoming aircraft, others lagging behind. The sky fills with light, but not precision. Inside the command shelter, Lieutenant Commander Hiroshi Takeda watches the radar screen with a focus that did not exist minutes ago. Range, he demands. 30 kilometers, Ensign Masato Kuroda replies. They have widened their approach slightly. More spread this time. Lieutenant Junichi Mori leans closer, studying the display. They are adapting, Mori says quietly. They are not repeating the exact path. Takeda clenches his jaw. They are testing us, he replies, trying to confuse our defenses. Kuroda shakes his head. No, sir. They are refining their attack. The words hang in the air. Refining, improving, learning in real time. Outside, Petty Officer Kenji Sato braces himself beside a stack of ammunition crates, now half overturned from earlier blasts. Smoke drifts across the harbor, thick and choking, illuminated by fires that continue to burn unchecked. He wipes his eyes, looking upward again. This time he sees them sooner. Shapes moving across the sky lower than before, faster slipping between searchlight beams with unsettling ease. They're changing altitude, he shouts. A gunner nearby adjusts elevation, trying to compensate. Too fast. I can't track them. The first bombs of the second wave fall before many crews can properly align their weapons. Explosions ripple across a different section of the harbor this time. Storage depots that were untouched moments ago now erupt in fire. A line of parked vehicles disappears in a chain of detonations that sends debris scattering across the ground. Inside one of the bombers, Captain Robert L. Hayes listens as his bombardier calls out corrections. Wind drift minimal. Adjusting release point 2 seconds earlier. Hayes nods. Confirmed. Maintained in formation. Behind him, the aircraft holds steady, each movement calculated, each adjustment small but deliberate. They are not improvising. They are executing. Back on the ground, Takeda hears the second wave of impacts and steps outside again despite the danger. The harbor is transforming before his eyes. Fires spread across multiple points, now no longer isolated, no longer containable. Smoke rises in thick columns, obscuring parts of the sky and making visual tracking even more difficult. They're using the smoke, Mori says, joining him. Takeda watches as a bomber slips through a gap in the haze, briefly illuminated before vanishing again. They should not be able to see through this, Takeda mutters. Mori answers without hesitation. They do not need to see. They already know where we are. The realization lands harder than the explosions. Inside the shelter, Kuroda continues to track the returns. They are splitting into smaller groups now, he reports. Each group targeting a different section. Takeda turns sharply. Why? Kuroda points to the screen. To avoid concentrated fire. To increase coverage. They are distributing their attack. Takeda steps closer, staring at the pattern. This is not random bombing. This is coordination at a level he did not expect. Outside, Sato dives to the ground as another explosion tears through a nearby structure. Heat washes over him, the air suddenly thick with ash and burning fuel. He crawls toward a damaged gun position where one of the crew lies injured. Can you move? Sato asks, grabbing the man's arm. The gunner shakes his head dazed. My leg. Sato looks around. There is no time. The engines are already returning again. At La. Second Lieutenant Daichi Hoshino struggles to regroup his men. Get the remaining aircraft out, he orders. Move them away from the runway. But the runway itself is already damaged, craters forming where bombs have struck with precise intervals. They hit the center line, a mechanic shouts. We can't take off. Hoshino looks toward the sky, frustration and disbelief mixing in his expression. They knew exactly where to strike. Back in the harbor, anti-aircraft fire intensifies, but it remains reactive. Each burst follows the bombers rather than anticipating them. Inside the command shelter, Takeda slams his hand against the table. Why are we always behind them, he demands. Kuroda does not answer immediately. He adjusts the radar controls, narrowing the focus, isolating one group of return. Because they are not relying on sight, he says finally. They are using information. Repeated, consistent information. Takeda stares at him. The radar. Kuroda nods. Yes, sir. The same thing we dismissed. The words cut deeper than any explosion. Outside, the third sequence of bombs from the second wave begins to fall. Each impact follows a pattern. Each strike builds on the last. Fuel storage, ammunition, airfield infrastructure, communication lines. Nothing is random. Everything is selected. Takeda steps back, the weight of realization pressing in. If we had trusted the system earlier. Mori begins. Takeda cuts him off. We would have acted sooner, he says. But even as he says it, he knows something else. Acting sooner might not have been enough. Because the enemy is not just arriving. They are adapting faster than any response being made below. Above the harbor, the bombers begin to climb slightly, preparing to withdraw. For a moment, it seems the attack might be ending. But on the radar screen, Kuroda sees something else. New returns, farther out. Approaching, another formation. They are not finished, he says. Takeda closes his eyes briefly. The pattern is clear now. Not a single strike. Not a limited raid. A sustained operation. Planned, repeated, relentless. Outside, the fires continue to spread, and the night is only beginning. The third formation appears on the radar before the sound reaches the harbor. Ensign Masato Kuroda does not hesitate this time. Multiple contacts, bearing 075, range 50 kilometers, larger formation than before. His voice is steady, but the weight behind it is unmistakable. Lieutenant Commander Hiroshi Takeda turns toward the screen slowly, as if resisting what he already knows he will see. The pattern is unmistakable. Tighter spacing, more returns, a wider front. They increase their numbers, Lieutenant Junichi Mori says under his breath. Takeda steps closer. Time to arrival, approximately 12 minutes. There is no debate now about whether the radar is correct. The only question left is what to do with the information. Outside, the harbor burns in multiple places. Flames reflect off the water in distorted waves of orange and black. Smoke drifts low, clinging to the surface, reducing visibility and distorting sound. You can feel the exhaustion already settling in. Men who were relaxed minutes ago are now strained, moving between positions with urgency that is beginning to fray. Petty Officer Kenji Sato drags a crate of ammunition toward a damaged gun mount, his hands shaking from adrenaline and heat. They're coming again, he says to no one in particular. A gunner beside him nods, eyes fixed on the sky. We'll be ready this time. But the words sound hollow. Inside the command shelter, Takeda grips the edge of the table. Full alert across all positions, he orders. No delays, no waiting for visual confirmation. The change is immediate. The doctrine has shifted. But it has shifted under pressure, not preparation. Kuroda relays the order, his movements precise. All units prepare for incoming formation. Estimated arrival 12 minutes. Radar confirmed. The phrase carries weight now. Radar confirmed. Outside, searchlights are repositioned more carefully, their operators coordinating angles rather than sweeping blindly. Anti-aircraft crews adjust their weapons in advance, aligning toward the projected approach. For the first time, the defense is not entirely reactive, but it is still incomplete. At Lakunai Airfield, 2nd Lieutenant Daiichi Hoshino receives the updated warning. 12 minutes, he repeats. He looks at the damaged runway, the burning wreckage, the aircraft that will not fly tonight. Get everyone into cover, he orders. We cannot defend the airfield from the ground. The men scatter, abandoning any remaining hope of launching a response. Back over the ocean, Captain Robert L. Hayes leads the third formation forward. Maintain altitude. Expect heavier resistance, he says into his headset. Behind him, the formation stretches wider than before, each aircraft maintaining its assigned position with disciplined precision. The navigator speaks quietly. Previous strikes confirmed. Target areas identified. We proceed with adjusted coordinates. Hayes nods. They are not entering uncertainty. They are returning to known conditions. Back in the harbor, Takeda watches the radar as the formation closes. 30 kilometers, Kuroda reports. Takeda turns to Mori. They will follow a similar pattern. Approach, strike, withdraw. Mori shakes his head. No, they will not repeat exactly. They have already shown that. Takeda looks back at the screen. The formation is splitting earlier this time, before reaching the harbor. They are dividing sooner, he says. Kuroda adjusts the display. Yes. Multiple approach vectors. The implication is immediate. They are avoiding concentrated defenses. They are forcing the harbor to stretch its response. Outside, Sato hears the engines again, louder than before. More of them. He looks toward the gun crew. This is different, he says. The gun captain nods slowly. Too many targets. Searchlights activate before the aircraft are visible beams intersecting in a coordinated grid. For a moment it feels like control, like preparation. Then the first aircraft breaks through, lower than expected, faster than before. The beams struggle to lock on. Adjust, the captain shouts. Track them. Anti-aircraft guns open fire, but the sky is crowded now. Targets crossing paths, changing altitude, shifting direction. The command shelter, Kuroda tracks multiple groups at once. They are attacking from 3 directions, he reports. Simultaneous approach. Takeda stares at the screen. They are overwhelming our response, Mori adds quietly. They planned for this. Outside, the bombs begin to fall again. This time, the pattern is even more precise. Communication centers are hit. Radio masts collapse in showers of sparks. Fuel reserves ignite in controlled sequences, each explosion feeding the next. At WWII, a second series of impacts tears through the remaining infrastructure. Hoshino presses himself into the dirt as debris rains down. They knew exactly where we were weakest, he says, barely audible over the explosions. Back in the harbor, Sato is thrown backward by a blast that erupts closer than any before. He hits the ground hard, ears ringing, vision blurred. When he looks up, the scene has changed again. More fire, more destruction, less coordination. The guns are still firing, but the rhythm is broken. Some crews have lost communication. Others fire independently, without guidance. Inside the shelter, the radar screen flickers as interference increases. Smoke, heat, damage to nearby systems. Kuroda fights to maintain clarity. Contacts still overhead, some withdrawing, others continuing attack runs. Takeda grips the edge of the console. Why are they not leaving, he demands. Mori answers. Because they do not need to. The truth settles in. This is not a single operation. This is sustained pressure. Calculated, measured, repeated. Takeda looks at the radar again, at the system he dismissed as unreliable, at the information it provided before the first bomb fell. And for the first time he says it aloud. We were wrong. No one responds, because everyone already knows. Above the harbor, the third formation continues its attack, each movement reinforcing the same pattern. Detection, adjustment, precision. And below, the defenders struggle not just against the enemy above them, but against the realization that came too late. The third wave does not end cleanly. It lingers. Aircraft circle wider now, some breaking formation entirely, others diving lower than before, pressing the attack beyond what the defenders expected. The rhythm that once seemed predictable has fractured into overlapping motions that strain every attempt at coordination below. You can hear it in the air. Engines at different altitudes, different speeds, different directions. Nothing aligns cleanly anymore. Inside the command shelter, Ensign Masato Kuroda struggles to keep the radar picture coherent as interference increases. The screen flickers, returns blurring together as smoke and electrical disturbance distort the signal. Contact splitting further, he says, voice tight. Some are withdrawing, others remain over target. Lieutenant Commander Hiroshi Takeda stands rigid behind him. Can you track individual groups? Kuroda shakes his head. Not clearly. Too much overlap, too much interference. Lieutenant Junichi Mori steps closer, studying the shifting display. They are creating confusion deliberately, Mori says, forcing us to lose clarity. Takeda clenches his jaw. Then we simplify. Focus on the closest threats. Outside, the harbor is barely recognizable. Fires burn across multiple sectors, merging into larger blazes that cast uneven light across the water. Smoke hangs low, thick enough to obscure entire sections of the sky. The reflections on the surface are broken by debris, oil, and burning fragments drifting with the current. Petty Officer Kenji Sato pulls himself upright again, his uniform streaked with ash. He looks toward a nearby gun position that has fallen silent. Why did they stop firing? He shouts. It's a surviving crew member answers, voice hoarse. We lost the feed. No direction. No orders. Sato looks around. Other guns continue firing, but without coordination. Some aim too high, others too low. Their bursts scattered and ineffective. They're still above us, Sato yells, pointing upward. But without guidance, without a clear picture, the guns are blind again. Inside the shelter, Takeda turns toward the communications officer. Re-establish contact with all batteries. Prioritize command links. The officer works frantically, switching channels, adjusting frequencies. Multiple lines down, he reports. Interference or damage? Hard to tell which. Takeda slams his hand against the table. Then send runners. Use signal lamps. Anything. Mori looks at him sharply. That will take time. Takeda meets his gaze. We have no choice. Back over the harbor, Captain Robert L. Hayes guides his aircraft through the smoke. Visibility reduced, his navigator reports. Switching to instrument guidance. Hayes nods. Maintain altitude. Follow assigned coordinates. Behind them, other aircraft adjust in similar ways, relying less on sight and more on the structured data that brought them here. They do not need to see the fires. They already know where they are. Below, Second Lieutenant Daiichi Hoshino emerges cautiously from cover at WWII airfield. The runway is broken craters cutting across its length. Wreckage smolders in scattered patches. We cannot launch anything, he says more to himself than anyone else. A soldier nearby asks, "What do we do now?" Hoshino looks towards the harbor where the glow of fire dominates the horizon. "We wait," he says. But even as he says it, the word feels wrong. Waiting is not a strategy. Back in the harbor, another sequence of explosions erupts near a cluster of fuel storage tanks that had survived the earlier strikes. The blast sends a column of fire upward, illuminating the entire area in a sudden, overwhelming brightness. Sato shields his eyes. "They found more," he mutters. The pattern continues. Nothing is missed. Inside the shelter, Kuroda adjusts the radar again, narrowing the focus to reduce interference. "I can isolate one group," he says. Small formation, circling back. Takeda steps closer. "Track them." Kuroda nods, concentrating. They are aligning for another run. Same bearing as before. Slight adjustment to the south. Takeda turns to the communications officer. "Relay targeting data to southern batteries." Immediate. The officer transmits the message, but the response is delayed. Some units acknowledge, others, no reply. Takeda exhales sharply. Then we rely on those who can respond. Outside, a cluster of anti-aircraft guns shifts position, their crews reacting to the new information. For the first time since the attack began, a few bursts align more closely with the path of incoming aircraft. A searchlight locks onto one bomber, holding it for several seconds. "Fire!" the gun captain shouts. Tracers converge, climbing toward the illuminated target. The bomber banks, sharply evasive, but the fire is closer now, more accurate. Inside the aircraft, Hayes hears the impacts against the fuselage. Taking fire, his co-pilot reports. Hayes keeps his voice steady. "Maintain course. We are committed." The bombardier continues his work, ignoring the noise. Target in sight. Releasing in 3, 2, 1. The bombs fall again. Below, the adjusted defense scores its first visible success. A burst connects with one of the trailing aircraft. A brief flash, then smoke trailing from the engine. Sato sees it. "They hit one," he shouts. For a moment, something shifts, a sense that resistance is possible. But it is brief. The damaged aircraft continues forward, releasing its payload before turning away. Even when hit, the pattern holds. Inside the shelter, Takeda watches the radar. "They are not breaking," he says. Mori nods grimly. They are willing to take losses to maintain the attack. The implication is clear. The defenders cannot rely on inflicting enough damage to stop the operation, because the operation is designed to continue regardless. Kuroda's voice cuts through the tension. "New contacts," he says. Takeda closes his eyes for a fraction of a second. "How many?" "Unclear. Signal is weak, but consistent." Another formation. "Farther out." "Approaching." Takeda opens his eyes again. The realization is complete now. This is not a battle that will end with this wave. It is a system, a cycle. Detection, approach, strike, withdraw, repeat. And the defenders are only now beginning to understand it. Too late to prevent what has already been set in motion. The fourth formation does not wait for silence. It arrives while the third wave is still fading into the distance, engines overlapping in a continuous roar that erases any sense of pause. The sky never empties, it never resets. There is no moment to recover, no clear boundary between one attack and the next. You can feel it now. The defenders are no longer responding to waves. They are trapped inside a constant assault. Inside the command shelter, Ensign Masato Kuroda stares at the radar screen as new returns merge with those still withdrawing. They are stacking their approach, he says. Incoming and outgoing formations overlapping. Lieutenant Commander Hiroshi Takeda grips the edge of the console. They are removing the gaps, he replies. Lieutenant Junichi Mori nods slowly. No time for us to reorganize, no time to reset positions. The original defensive plan was built around intervals. Detection, Preparation, engagement, recovery. It no longer exists. Outside, Petty Officer Kenji Sato moves between gun positions that no longer resemble a coordinated defense. Some crews continue firing, others have abandoned damaged weapons, and a few stand frozen, overwhelmed by the constant noise and light. "Keep firing a gun," Captain shouts. Though his voice is nearly lost in the chaos, Sato looks up. The sky is crowded now, not with a single formation, but with multiple aircraft crossing paths at different heights. Searchlights struggle to track individual targets, beams colliding and scattering across smoke-filled air. "There are too many," Sato says, barely audible. A nearby crewman nods, eyes wide. "We cannot follow all of them." Inside the shelter, communications continue to fail. Southern batteries not responding, the officer reports. Eastern line, intermittent. Northern positions reporting heavy damage. Takeda turns sharply. "Centralize control here," he orders. "We direct all remaining units from this position." The officer hesitates. "With respect, sir, we do not have full contact." Takeda's voice hardens. "Then we use what we have." Kuroda adjusts the radar again, trying to isolate any clear pattern. "They are no longer maintaining strict formation," he says. "Some groups are breaking earlier, others are diving deeper into the harbor." Mori studies the screen. "They are exploiting our fragmentation." Takeda looks at him, "And we are giving it to them." Back over the harbor, Captain Robert L. Hayes leads his aircraft through a corridor of smoke and scattered fire. "Resistance increasing," his co-pilot says. "But disorganized." Hayes nods. "Maintain pattern. Follow assigned targets." Behind him, the formation adjusts slightly, each aircraft moving according to pre-planned roles rather than reacting to the chaos below. They are not affected by the confusion. They are operating above it. Below, Sato stumbles as another explosion shakes the ground. He turns toward a gun position that has been hit directly. The weapon twisted, the crew scattered. "Medic," someone shouts. But the call fades into the noise. There are too many calls, too many fires, too many directions. At Lakunai Airfield, Second Lieutenant Daichi Hoshino watches as distant explosions continue to ripple across the harbor. "They are still attacking," a soldier says beside him. Hoshino nods. "They will continue until they achieve everything they came for." He looks at the ruined runway again. "And we cannot stop them." Back in the harbor, Takeda steps outside once more. The scene is beyond control now. Fires have merged into larger infernos. Smoke obscures entire sections of the harbor. The water reflects not just flames, but the silhouettes of aircraft moving above constant relentless. He looks upward. For a moment, he tries to follow a single aircraft. He cannot. There are too many. Inside the shelter, Kuroda's voice rises. Multiple groups converging again. Short range, less than 10 kilometers. Takeda turns back inside. "Direct all available fire toward central approach," he orders. "Ignore outer targets." The decision is immediate and costly. Outside, gun crews shift their aim toward Sennar, the center of the harbor, concentrating fire where the radar indicates the densest group. For a brief moment, the sky above that area fills with coordinated bursts. Tracers converge. Searchlights hold steady. A few aircraft are forced to break their approach, banking sharply to avoid the concentrated fire. Sato sees it. "They're turning," he shouts. Hope flickers, but it is short-lived. The outer groups, now ignored, descend without resistance. Bombs fall along the edges of the harbor, striking areas left exposed by the shift in defense. Fuel lines rupture. Secondary explosions chain together. A storage facility ignites in a massive fireball that sends a shockwave across the water. Inside the shelter, Mori turns to Takeda. "They anticipated this," he says. Takeda does not respond, because the pattern is clear. Every adjustment made below is being countered above. Not by chance, by design. Kuroda's hands move quickly over the controls. "They are rotating targets," he says. "When we concentrate, they shift. When we spread, they converge." Takeda stares at the screen. The system shows it all. Every movement, every adjustment, every consequence. Too late. Outside, Sato drops to the ground as another blast erupts nearby. He covers his head, the heat pressing against him, the noise overwhelming. When he looks up again, the harbor is barely visible through the smoke. The guns still fire, but the rhythm is gone. The coordination is gone. The plan is gone. Inside the shelter, Takeda finally speaks the words he has resisted. "We have lost control." Mori does not argue. Kuroda does not look away from the screen, because the radar continues to show the same truth. The enemy is still coming, still adapting, still executing, and the defense once built on certainty and structure has collapsed into reaction and survival. Above the harbor, the aircraft continue their patterns, unbroken, uninterrupted, and below the original plan no longer exists. The fires no longer spread in lines. They spread in fields. Entire sections of the harbor burn together, now merging into wide zones of heat and light that erase boundaries between targets. What had once been individual installations, separate responsibilities, clearly defined objectives, has become a single shifting mass of destruction. You can feel the difference. There is no longer a sense of protecting something specific, only the attempt to prevent everything from collapsing at once. Inside the command shelter, Ensign Masato Kuroda struggles to maintain any clarity on the radar screen. Interference pulses across the display, the edges of returns blurring some signals, vanishing entirely before reappearing seconds later. "I am losing resolution," he says. The interference is increasing. Lieutenant Commander Hiroshi Takeda stands behind him, his uniform stained with smoke and ash. "Do what you can," he replies. "Even partial information is better than none." Lieutenant Junichi Mori leans over the map table, marking positions with quick, deliberate strokes. "We need to prioritize what remains functional," Mori says. "Communication, fuel reserves, command infrastructure." Takeda looks at the map. Several of those positions are already marked as damaged. "Then we prioritize what is left of those," he answers. The shift is subtle but decisive. They are no longer defending the harbor. They are preserving fragments. Outside, Petty Officer Kenji Sato moves through smoke that stings his eyes and throat. He passes a group of sailors attempting to drag a hose toward a burning storage area. The water pressure weak, inconsistent. "It is not enough," one of them says, voice strained. Sato looks at the flames. They are too large, too intense. He turns away. Above, the engines continue, not as tightly grouped now, but still present, still circling, still returning. At Lakunai, Airfield Second Lieutenant Daichi Hoshino gathers what remains of his men. "We cannot hold the airfield," he says. "We move to secondary positions." A soldier hesitates. "What about the equipment?" Hoshino looks back at the damaged runway, the wreckage of aircraft that will never fly again. "It is already lost," he says. The words are simple. Final. Back in the harbor, Takeda steps outside once more. The night has changed. What was once darkness is now a constant glow. The sky lit by fire and reflection. Smoke drifts upward in thick layers, occasionally breaking to reveal aircraft passing overhead. He listens. The engines are still there, but different. Fewer in number at this moment. A gap. Not silence, but something close to it. Inside the shelter, Kuroda notices it first. "Fewer returns," he says. "Some groups are withdrawing." Takeda turns. "How many remain?" Unclear. "But the density is lower." Mori exhales slowly. "They are pausing," he says. Takeda shakes his head. "No. They are repositioning. The distinction matters." Outside, Sato notices the same change. The sky feels less crowded. The gunfire becomes less constant. Men begin to move more deliberately again, no longer reacting to immediate threats, but trying to re-establish some form of order. "Check the lines," a voice calls. "Reconnect the batteries." Sato joins a group attempting to realign a damaged gun mount. "Can it still fire?" he asks. One of the crew nods. With adjustment, they work quickly, hands moving with renewed purpose. For a moment, it feels like recovery. Inside the shelter, Takeda makes a decision. "Use the interval," he says. "Re-establish communication. Consolidate remaining units." The communications officer nods, switching channels, calling out to positions that may or may not still exist. "Central command to all operational units. Report status. Report status." Some replies come. Weak, fragmented, but present. Mori marks them on the map. "These are still active," he says. "We can build around them." Takeda studies the positions. A reduced network. Incomplete, but something. Kuroda continues to monitor the radar. Then his expression changes. "New contacts," he says. Takeda closes his eyes briefly. "How far?" 60 kilometers. Multiple groups. Larger than before. Mori looks up sharply. They increased again. Takeda opens his eyes. The interval was never meant for recovery. It was meant for preparation. Above the ocean, Captain Robert L. Hayes leads the next formation forward. Reform. Complete his navigator reports. All groups accounted for. Hayes nods. Proceed. They are not rushing. They are not reacting. They are continuing. Back in the harbor, the brief sense of recovery begins to fracture. Sato hears the engines again, distant at first, then growing. He looks toward the sky where the glow of fire meets the returning darkness. They are coming back, he says. The words carry across nearby crews, spreading faster than orders. Inside the shelter, Takeda stands still for a moment, then speaks. All units prepare for renewed attack, he orders. This time we act immediately on radar data. No delay. Kuroda relays the message. The phrase is clear. No delay. But the damage has already shaped the response. Fewer guns. Fewer positions. Weakened coordination. Outside searchlights attempt to align again, but several are gone destroyed or without power. The beams that remain sweep the sky unevenly, leaving gaps that cannot be covered. Sato grips the side of the gun mount as his crew prepares. Ready, the gun captain says. But the word lacks confidence. Inside the shelter, Kuroda tracks the incoming formation. They are splitting earlier again, he says. More vectors than before. Mori studies the map. They are targeting what remains. Takeda nods. They learned. The statement is quiet, heavy, because it reflects not only the enemy's adaptation, but their own failure to adapt in time. Outside, the engines grow louder. The gap closes. The sky begins to fill again. And whatever remains of the harbor now stands exposed already. Damaged, already weakened, facing another wave that has been shaped by everything that came before. The next formation does not descend immediately. It circles first, higher than before, wider. You can feel the difference the moment the engines return. Not just in sound, but in intent. The aircraft are no longer pressing directly into the chaos. They are observing it, measuring it, selecting from it. Inside the command shelter, Ensign Masato Kuroda watches the radar with a stillness that has replaced urgency. They are holding position, he says. Maintaining distance? Lieutenant Commander Hiroshi Takeda steps beside him. Why? Kuroda does not answer right away. He adjusts the gain, sharpening the returns. They are studying what remains, he says finally. Lieutenant Junichi Mori looks at the map, now marked with burned sectors, broken lines, and isolated points of resistance. They no longer need to guess, Mori adds. They are choosing. Outside, Petty Officer Kenji Sato grips the side of the gun mount, waiting. The sky above him is quieter but not empty. The aircraft are there, just beyond reach. He can hear them shifting, repositioning like something circling before striking again. Why are they waiting? One of the crew asks. Sato does not respond, because the waiting feels worse than the attack. At Lakunai Airfield, Second Lieutenant Daiichi Hoshino watches the horizon where faint movement is barely visible against the glow of distant fires. They are not finished, he says. A soldier beside him nods slowly. They never were. Back in the harbor, Takeda steps outside once more. The scene has settled into something unnatural. Fires still burn, but lower now in some places, higher in others. Smoke drifts unevenly, opening gaps that reveal sections of the harbor that were hidden before. He looks upward. For the first time, he sees the aircraft clearly. Not just flashes, not just silhouettes, but formation, spacing, control. They are not struggling to navigate the night. They are moving through it with certainty. Inside the shelter, Kuroda tracks their movement. They are aligning again, he says. Multiple groups, different targets. Takeda turns back inside. Which targets? Kuroda points to the screen, then to the map. Command structures. Remaining fuel. Communication nodes. Mori studies the marked positions. They are eliminating what allows us to respond. The realization lands fully now. Not just for Takeda, for everyone in the room. This is not an attack on the harbor. It is an attack on the ability to defend it. Outside, Sato hears the engines shift again. Lower, closer. They are coming, he says. But there is no urgency in his voice now. Only recognition. The guns around him are fewer. The searchlights weaker. The coordination fragile. He looks at the sky again. And for the first time, he understands something he did not allow himself to think before. They cannot stop this. Inside the LAD aircraft, Captain Robert L. Hayes receives the final adjustment. Target priority updated, the navigator says. Proceed with command and control points. Hayes nods once. Understood. There is no hesitation, no uncertainty. only continuation. Below, Takeda watches the radar as the formations begin their descent. They're ignoring the fires, he says. Kuroda nods. They already achieved those objectives, Mori adds quietly. Now they remove what remains. The first bombs of this phase fall with a different kind of precision, not widespread, not exploratory. Focused, a direct hit strikes a communications center, the structure collapsing in a burst of flame and debris. The lights flicker. The communications officer shouts, "We lost another line." Takeda does not react outwardly, but something inside him has shifted completely. Outside, Sato sees a searchlight go dark as its position is struck directly. The beam cuts off instantly, leaving a gap in the sky that is not filled. "They are taking the lights," he says. Another explosion follows closer to the central command area. The ground shakes. Inside the shelter, Kuroda steadies himself against the console. "Impact near our position," he says. Takeda looks at the radar again. The returns are still there. Still moving, still controlled. He thinks back to the first detection, to the moment it appeared on the screen. Clear, consistent, ignored. "We saw them," he says quietly. No one answers. Because they all remember. Kuroda's hands rest on the controls, no longer adjusting, no longer searching. "They showed us everything," he says. Mori looks at the map, now filled with marks that no longer represent strategy, only damage. And we chose not to believe it. Outside, Sato lowers his head as another explosion tears through a nearby structure. He no longer looks up immediately, because he already knows what he will see. Aircraft, returning, precise, unstoppable. Inside the shelter, Takeda stands still. The noise continues around him. Explosions, engines, voices. But they feel distant now. Because the realization is complete, not sudden, not dramatic, but absolute. They were not outmatched in the moment. They were outmatched from the beginning. The radar had shown the pattern. The enemy had followed it. And every delay, every dismissal, every hesitation had allowed the pattern to unfold exactly as intended. Above the harbor, the final sequence of strikes begins. And below, the understanding arrives fully. Too late to change anything. The final bombs fall with a precision that no longer surprises anyone below. There is no scramble now, no shouted confusion, only reaction shaped by exhaustion and certainty. Inside the command shelter, Ensign Masato Kuroda watches the radar screen as the last formation completes its run. The returns begin to thin, not because they are being forced away, but because they are leaving on their own terms. "They are withdrawing," he says quietly. Lieutenant Commander Hiroshi Takeda does not respond immediately. He stands still, listening. The engines are already beginning to fade. Not abruptly, not in retreat, but in completion. Lieutenant Junichi Mori looks at the map, though there is nothing left to analyze. "Do we pursue any remaining contacts?" Mori asks, though the question carries no expectation. Takeda shakes his head slowly. "With what?" The answer settles without resistance. Outside, Petty Officer Kenji Sato rises unsteadily from where he had taken cover. The sky above him is emptying now, the last silhouettes slipping into the darkness beyond the harbor. The silence that follows is not immediate. It comes in fragments, engines fading, guns ceasing one by one, voices lowering, until only the fires remain. He looks around. The harbor is no longer a structure of positions and responsibilities. It is a field of damage. Ships sit at angles they were never meant to hold. Some burn, others drift without control. The water carries oil debris and scattered flames that move slowly with the current. A nearby gun mount stands silent, its crew either gone or unable to continue. The weapon points upward, still but without purpose. Sato removes his helmet, holding it loosely at his side. "They are gone," someone says nearby. He nods, but the word "gone" feels incomplete. Inside the command shelter, the lights flicker weakly as damaged systems struggle to maintain power. Kuroda adjusts the radar one last time. The screen shows only faint, distant returns. Retreating, no longer a threat, but no longer needed. He turns to Takeda. The sky is clear. Takeda looks at the display. For the first time that night, the radar shows what they once trusted. Nothing. He steps closer, not to confirm, but to understand. Hours earlier, this same screen had shown the beginning, the pattern, the approach, the certainty, and he had dismissed it. Mori speaks quietly. "We can begin assessing damage." Takeda does not move, because assessment implies control, and control is gone. Outside, Sato walks slowly across the damaged ground. He passes men tending to the wounded, others staring at the fires, some simply standing still as if movement itself has become unnecessary. He looks toward the water. A ship burns steadily, its reflection broken by waves that carry fragments of wood and metal. No one is giving orders. No one is directing. The structure that held everything together has dissolved. At WWII airfield, Second Lieutenant Daichi Hoshino steps out from cover, moving across a runway that no longer functions as one. Craters interrupt its length, debris scattered across its surface. He looks toward the harbor. The glow is still visible. They finished what they came for, he says. A soldier beside him asks, will they return? Hoshino does not answer, because the question no longer matters. Back in the harbor, Takeda finally turns away from the radar. He walks to the entrance of the shelter and steps outside. The air is thick with smoke, but quieter now. He looks upward. The sky is empty. No engines, no movement, nothing to track, nothing to respond to. He lowers his gaze to the harbor below. Fires, damage, silence between sounds. He speaks not to anyone in particular. We had the warning. Kuroda stands behind him, hearing the words but not replying. Because there is nothing to add. The system had worked. It had shown everything. It had revealed the pattern before the first aircraft arrived. And they had chosen not to act. Mori steps beside Takeda, looking out over the same scene. It would not have stopped them completely, Mori says. Takeda nods once. Number. He pauses. But it would have changed something. The difference remains unspoken. Not victory. Not survival. But time. Preparation. Resistance. Things that no longer exist in this moment. Outside, Sato reaches the edge of the water and stops. He watches the reflections of fire move across the surface, distorted and shifting. Behind him, the harbor continues to burn. Ahead of him, only darkness. He does not look up again. Because there is nothing left to see. Inside the shelter, the radar remains active, its screen steady, empty. No more patterns, no more warnings. Only the quiet confirmation that everything it had shown has already passed. Takeda turns back once more, looking at the display. For a brief moment, he considers what it represented. Not just a machine, but a chance. Then he steps away. The night continues. The fires burn, and the consequences remain fixed and irreversible.